Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're going to be tackling a topic that's really complex and sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Luffle trick.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of this? This is something that's been, like, making the rounds on social media,
Yeah.
and it's being presented as a potential way for girls to escape forced marriage.
Right.
But there's a lot of debate about whether this actually
yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Or even if it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got some research and some expert opinions to go through to try to see if we can get to the bottom of this.
It's a definitely a topic that needs careful consideration.
Right.
So the idea, like on the surface, it seems kind of simple.
Right.
A girl hides a metal object, like a spoon.
Okay.
And that's where the Luffle comes from, and the Luffle trick. It's German for spoon.
Oh.
She hides it in her clothing to trigger the metal detector at the airport.
Right.
And the hope is that this creates a private moment where she can alert security that this is happening. But as you can imagine, there's so many layers to unpack here.
Yeah, like, does this actually work?
Right.
I mean, in practice, does this work?
Yeah.
And what about the risks? Like, what could go wrong?
Exactly. Yeah. Those are the key questions that we need to try to figure out.
So we've got this piece by Clemens Linschinger,
Okay.
and he really dove into this Luffle trick.
Yeah.
And he reached out to a bunch of Austrian authorities
Uh-huh.
to get their take on this. The Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Foreign Affairs,
Okay.
as well as a network of women's shelters
Interesting.
to see, what they had to say about it.
What did they say?
Well, this is interesting. The ministries, they just ignored his request for comment.
Ooh.
Oh.
That's interesting. That's a red flag. Why wouldn't they comment? I wonder.
It really makes you wonder, right? Like, is there a lack of awareness? Are they hesitant to address this?
Yeah, is it a political thing? I don't know. It's hard to say.
It is. But then the network of women's shelters,
Mhm.
they had something to say about it.
And what was their take?
They actually strongly advised against it.
Really? Wow. I mean, I guess it makes sense. You're relying on so many things going right
Right.
in that one moment.
It's risky.
It is risky.
Yeah. So what were they worried about?
Well, they emphasized early intervention, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But they seemed mostly worried about just relying on this very last-minute thing. Imagine you're a young girl
Right?
in a vulnerable situation like that.
Uh-huh.
And, I mean, to escape forced marriage is already terrifying.
Absolutely.
But then to try to do this at the airport,
Right.
not knowing what's going to happen and what if it goes wrong.
Right. And it's not really addressing the underlying problem.
Right, exactly. It's not dealing with the coercion and control.
It's kind of a Band-Aid.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so it gets even more complicated.
Okay.
Because he contacted this Viennese counseling center,
Okay.
and they only responded after he contacted them several times.
Oh, wow.
And they told him they weren't aware of any cases where the Luffle trick had actually worked. And they brought up this really important point about airport security.
Okay. What's that?
Well, what happens if the girl manages to set off the metal detector?
Right.
What happens next?
Yeah.
It really depends on the awareness and the preparedness of the airport security. Like, are they trained to deal with this?
Right. Do they even know this is a thing?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So that's kind of a gamble in itself.
It's a huge gamble, and you're talking about a young person's safety
Right.
and their future. Like,
Right.
it can't just be left up to chance.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be something in place to
Yeah.
make sure that the response is appropriate.
So then
Yeah.
he finds this contradiction. The National Center for Combating Forced Marriage,
Okay.
which you would think would be the authority,
Yeah, you'd think so.
they recommend the Luffle trick.
Wow, that's a surprise.
Yeah. On their website, they advise girls to use coins or a metal object
Huh.
to get attention at security checkpoints.
So you have experts on both sides of this. Yeah. Which is, I guess, bound to create confusion for anybody
Right.
who's trying to figure this out.
Yeah. And it shows just how complex this issue is.
Absolutely.
So then there's another layer.
Okay.
Austrian law.
Oh, yeah, the legal aspects.
Yeah.
This is always where it gets complicated.
Right. So Austrian law says that minors
Mhm.
are legally obligated
Okay.
to follow their parents' instructions,
Including traveling.
including traveling abroad.
Wow.
So even if a girl manages to alert security,
Yeah.
the police can't just automatically step in
Right. Because it's not illegal.
unless there's a court order
Right.
or there's some, like, imminent danger.
Yeah. So again, this is highlighting the limits of this Luffle trick idea.
Yeah.
Because even if it works how you want it to,
Mm-hmm.
the system might not protect her.
Right. And we have to remember that we're talking about real people's lives here.
Absolutely.
These aren't just abstract legal concepts.
Yes. It's a real girl
Right.
in a really tough spot.
Exactly. So it's not enough to just rely on this one tactic.
No.
So what other options are out there?
Well, the National Center, even though they're like pro-lawful trick, they also suggest some other things.
Okay, like what?
Like, if you lock yourself in a bathroom and call the police,
Okay.
ask a bystander for help, or those emergency call points.
Okay.
So these seem more like direct.
Right, those are more active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're taking charge of the situation.
Okay. And also going back to what the Women's Shelter Network said, early intervention.
Yeah. They stress that get help as early as you can
Okay.
from, those counseling centers.
Right.
They can help. They have lots of resources.
Yeah. So it's more about having a plan, a network of support.
Right.
Not just this one, like Hail Mary at the airport.
Exactly.
So the Luffle trick
Yeah.
is maybe not the silver bullet that some people think.
Yeah. So what does early intervention really look like? What kind of resources are there?
Right. That's what we need to unpack next.
Yeah. Early intervention is really about recognizing the signs, that a forced marriage situation might be developing
Right.
and taking action
Okay.
before it gets out of control.
So what are some of those signs? What should people be looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's important to remember that every situation is different.
Right.
There's no one checklist that fits everybody.
Right.
But there are some common, red flags. Like if you see a sudden change in behavior,
Okay.
like, someone's withdrawing from friends and activities, or they seem really scared about an upcoming trip abroad,
Oh, right.
stuff like that. So it's really about picking up on those subtle cues
Mm-hmm.
that maybe something's wrong
Yeah.
and being willing to ask, hey, is everything okay? Just that someone cares can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. So what kind of resources and support are out there? Like what if someone is concerned about this?
Well, there's organizations like the National Center for Combating Forced Marriage. They have tons of information and advice.
Okay.
They have hotlines, websites, even online chats
Okay.
where people can get confidential support.
So even if you don't want to talk about it face to face.
Exactly, yeah. And there's often local resources too,
Wow.
counseling centers,
Right.
women's shelters, youth groups,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
It sounds like there's a lot out there, but it must be really hard to know where to go.
Yeah, it can feel pretty overwhelming, especially if you're, in a crisis situation.
Right.
And that's why, again, early intervention is so important
Yeah.
because the sooner someone gets help, the more options they have. It's about empowering people
Yeah.
before they get desperate.
Okay. So that brings us back to something that we were talking about before, the legal stuff
Uh-huh.
and how complicated it can be,
Mhm.
especially for minors.
Right.
We were talking about Austrian law,
Yeah.
how they can make things really tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Even if a girl tries to escape at the airports.
Right. Because in Austria, like a lot of countries,
Right.
parents have a legal right to decide where their kids go,
Right.
and kids have to obey them.
So even if a girl says she doesn't want to go,
Yeah.
the authorities can't just do whatever she wants.
Right. It's not that simple.
Right.
There's procedures and stuff,
Right.
and that takes time.
Which she might not have.
Exactly. Yeah. And it just shows you that the legal systems need to do more to protect these kids,
Yeah.
especially in these forced marriage situations. Like the kids' wishes should matter.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So what can be done about these legal issues?
Well, there's, organizations and people who are working to change the laws
Okay.
so they better protect victims of forced marriage.
Okay.
They're pushing for laws that, recognize that this is coercion
Yeah.
and to give kids a stronger voice
Okay.
in the legal stuff.
So it sounds like people are working on it,
Yeah,
but it's slow.
it is slow. And until then,
Yeah.
it's really important for people to know what their rights are and to get legal advice if they're in this situation.
Okay.
There's lawyers and organizations that can help.
Okay. So you were saying earlier that the Luffle trick is kind of like a Band-Aid.
Right, yeah.
So what are some more lasting ways to deal with the reasons why this happens in the first place?
Well, it starts with education, really understanding this.
Okay.
We need to change the cultural norms and beliefs
Right.
that lead to forced marriage.
So how do we do that?
Well, by talking about it more, being open and honest,
Okay.
teaching people about human rights,
Okay.
gender equality, and healthy relationships.
Right.
So young people can make their own choices.
So it's really about changing how people think.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And that takes time,
Yeah.
but it's super important if we want to really see this change.
Right.
We need to get to a place where this is not just illegal,
Yeah.
but people just don't do this anymore.
Right. What about families and communities?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They play a big role in this, too.
Huge role.
Yeah.
We need to involve them
Okay.
in a good way,
Yeah.
give them information and resources, talk to them about their concerns,
Oh, yeah.
work together to find solutions that respect everybody.
So it sounds like we need a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Legal changes,
Yeah.
education,
Yeah.
working with communities, and empowering people.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us with the Luffle trick? Is there ever a time when it might work?
That's a really tough one.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
I get why someone might feel so desperate that they'd try anything,
Yeah.
but I still think it's really risky.
Mm-hmm.
And you're relying on so many things outside of your control.
So even if someone's in a really bad situation,
Yeah.
you wouldn't recommend it?
I would always say, talk to someone you trust.
Okay.
Like the National Center
Yeah.
or a local counseling center, because they know how to help.
Right.
They can look at your specific situation.
So there's no one answer that fits everybody.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's why it's so important to talk about this,
Mhm.
to make people aware,
Yeah.
so people can get help
Right.
and challenge the system.
Okay. So the Liffle trick,
Yeah.
while it might seem like a quick solution,
Yeah.
it's really risky and there's no guarantee it'll work.
Exactly.
And we should focus on the more reliable solutions.
Right.
Like early intervention, legal reform.
Right.
Working with communities.
Yeah, it's about having that safety net
Mm-hmm.
instead of that last minute,
Right.
escape plan that might not work.
And he actually makes a really interesting suggestion
Oh, yeah.
for what to do if you see this level trick thing online.
Okay.
He says, leave a comment
Okay.
that explains the risks
Okay.
and point people to those more reliable resources.
Yeah, instead of just
Right.
arguing about it.
Right. Yeah.
Just give them the info.
Yeah, like the National Center or the
Yeah.
counseling centers.
It's smart because
Yeah.
you're using that to educate people.
Exactly. Instead of it just being this harmful thing.
Yeah, you're taking control of the narrative.
Yeah.
That's great.
And it shows that we all have a part to play
Absolutely.
in dealing with this.
Yeah, it's not just experts.
Right.
It's everybody.
So what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
As individuals?
Well, first of all, learn about it.
Okay.
Read up on forced marriage,
Mm-hmm.
the warning signs, the resources,
Right.
and then talk about it.
Yeah.
Share that with your friends and family.
Yeah. So start with awareness.
Yeah, and if you see something, say something.
Okay.
If you see those red flags,
Yeah.
talk to someone or
Yeah.
call one of those organizations.
Yeah. Just letting someone know that you care
Exactly.
can make a big difference.
Yeah, huge. You don't have to be an expert
Right.
to help.
Okay. So to wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
the Leffel trick. While it might seem like a good idea on the surface,
Yeah,
it's just not reliable.
there's better ways.
Yeah. We need to address the root causes.
Absolutely.
Like we were talking about, the education, legal reform, community stuff.
Yeah, empower people.
It's about creating a world where everyone can choose their own path
Exactly. Yeah.
without being forced.
And remember, this is just a starting point.
Mhm.
It's not legal advice.
Right.
If you need help, contact those resources.
Yeah, or lawyer.
Yeah.
And to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
We saw that even the experts disagree about the Leffel trick.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
That's a good question.
Could it be cultural differences?
Maybe.
Or how much people trust the authorities?
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah.
There's no easy answers.
But by talking about it
Yeah,
and asking these questions,
for sure.
we can hopefully start to find solutions.
Exactly. Thanks for listening, everybody.